to, well, let's just say the relationship between Nigerian politics and the judicial system.
Oh, yeah.
It's not exactly a secret that sometimes those two things get a little too close for comfort, right?
Right.
But what we're looking at today is really raising some eyebrows, even in Nigeria.
Definitely.
We're talking about Nyesom Wike.
Oh, yeah. He's a...
His career is really interesting, right? It's intertwined with the careers of some pretty prominent judges.
Yeah, you could almost say it's like a political thriller.
Yeah.
One man's ambition and all these connections to the people who are actually controlling justice.
Exactly. And we're going to use this piece from Restore Nigeria News by Professor Chidi Adinkalu.
Oh, yeah, Otinku.
To help guide us through this.
His stuff on judicial independence is great.
Yeah, and trust me, it's a wild ride, this story.
It really is.
Okay, so let's go all the way back to 1998. Okay. Nyesom Wike, young and ambitious, running for chairman of his local government area.
So local politics.
Yeah, really local, but
Still important.
Oh, very important, especially in Nigeria.
Especially in Nigeria.
He's the candidate for the PDP.
People's Democratic Party.
Yeah, but things get kind of messy.
Oh, how so?
So right before the election, they swap out his name with another candidate.
Wow, that's pretty shady.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise, Wike doesn't win.
I mean, even those local elections are super competitive, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot at stake, especially when you think about controlling all those resources.
Absolutely, but Wike's not giving up that easy.
Of course not.
He goes straight to court, argues that the guy who they said was the winner wasn't even a legitimate PDP candidate in the first place.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and this is where the story gets really interesting.
This is where we see those connections starting, I bet.
Right. The judge who's presiding over this appeal, Judge Sylvanus Nasofor,
Okay.
he throws out the election result.
The whole thing?
And he orders a rerun.
Wow.
With Wike as the PDP candidate.
Okay.
This time, Wike wins.
Interesting.
And get this, Nyesom later becomes a huge supporter of Muhammadu Buhari's presidential ambitions.
Oh, wow. So that makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how these relationships might influence these decisions even years later?
Years later. It's crazy.
It really is.
That's like planting a seed, right? That grows into this massive tree and casts a shadow over everything.
I like that. A very good metaphor.
So anyway, this win, it basically launches Wike's career.
It's his start.
He becomes chief of staff to the governor of River State.
Okay.
Then, in 2015, he's like, I want to be governor myself.
And I bet he got some help along the way.
Well, it's interesting how often these favorable court rulings seem to just line up perfectly with what he wants to do.
Yeah, it's a pattern. You can't ignore it.
No, you can't. So he wins the governorship, but of course, the other guy challenges the results.
Naturally.
It goes all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Wow, the highest court in the land.
The highest court in the land. And guess who writes the decision that ends up upholding Wike's victory?
I don't know. Tell me.
Judge Kudirat Kekere-Akin.
Now that name rings a bell.
Well, she later becomes the Chief Justice of Nigeria.
Of course. It's like Wike's entire path is paved with these connections.
It's wild, right?
A lot.
But here's where things take a really sharp turn.
Okay.
Wike gets a reputation for being incredibly generous to judges, especially in River State.
Generous? What are we talking here? Like a fruit basket?
No. We're talking SUVs, luxury homes, even cash.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's a lot.
Well, that's going to raise some eyebrows.
It raises a lot of ethical red flags.
Yeah, especially since he's always involved in these legal battles himself.
Exactly.
It just creates this appearance that justice can be,
Bought.
Yeah, bought. And then erodes the public's trust in the whole system.
Absolutely. And here's the kicker.
What's that?
Wike complains all the time about the judiciary lacking independence.
Wait, well, he's giving them all these gifts.
All while showering them with gifts.
That's like saying you want to be healthy while eating a whole cake.
Right. Like a total contradiction.
Completely.
And the judges don't even seem to care.
Really?
The Chief Justice of Nigeria at the time actually praises Wike's love for the judiciary.
That's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
Having the highest judicial authority in the country saying something like that, that's a big problem.
It normalizes this relationship that, at the very least, looks really suspicious.
At the very least.
But it doesn't end there.
Of course not.
His generosity wasn't just limited to judges in River State.
Oh, no.
There's this allegation that when he was governor, he awarded a pretty big contract to Zainab Bokachua, who was the former president of the Court of Appeal.
Okay, what was the contract for?
To build a court building in Port Harcourt.
Oh, so that just adds another layer to this whole thing. Like,
right.
What were the motivations there?
Exactly.
It just raises more questions.
And guess what? It doesn't end there.
It can't.
Okay, so fast forward to Wike as Minister of the Federal Capital Territory.
Okay.
Now he's on the national stage.
Big stage now.
And what's one of his first moves?
Oh, I can guess. Something with judges and their comfort.
You got it.
Hmm.
He allocates all this prime land in Abuja for judicial housing.
So the capital.
Yeah, and guess who shows up to the project launch? All smiles.
Let me guess. More judges.
The current Chief Justice of Nigeria and the President of the Court of Appeal.
It's like he doesn't even see the problem.
I know, right?
This just blurs the lines between these different branches of government.
And his reasoning. Get this. He says he's building these houses to protect judges from, quote, temptation by unscrupulous politicians.
Wait, so he's acknowledging the problem while being a part of the problem.
While being a huge E part of the problem.
That's rich.
Yeah, so what does Professor Dinkalu have to say about all this?
Yeah, what does he think?
He doesn't hold back. He accuses Wike of judicial subordination.
Whoa, now that's a strong word.
Yeah.
It means like trying to corrupt someone, especially in a legal context, right?
Right.
I feel like this is what a lot of Nigerians are scared of. This erosion of judicial independence.
And he points to a specific rule in the Nigerian Code of Conduct for judicial officers.
Okay, what does it say?
It basically says that judges can have relationships that would even give the appearance of bias.
So even the perception of something wrong is bad.
Exactly.
It's about protecting that whole judicial process.
So the big question is this just Wike? Or is this a symptom of something bigger going on in Nigeria?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into next. We'll look at the consequences of all this and what it means for the rule of law in Nigeria.
This could have implications beyond just Nigeria, too, right?
Oh, yeah, this is about a fair and just society for everyone.
Exactly.
So stay with us.
It's just so brazen, you know?
I know, right?
Like, he's not even trying to hide it.
No.
The connections, the gifts, it's all out in the open.
It's almost like he's daring someone to challenge him.
Right.
It makes you wonder, why isn't there more pushback?
Yeah, where is everybody?
Where are the politicians, the lawyers, the people?
You'd think people would be demanding accountability.
I know.
Maybe it's fear, you know?
Yeah.
Wike's a powerful guy.
Oh, yeah.
Going up against him, that takes guts.
Could have serious consequences.
Definitely.
Or maybe some people are actually benefiting from this.
Ooh, that's a good point.
So they just look the other way.
Yeah, it's like this tangled web.
It really is.
Hard to know where it all leads.
We also can't ignore the history here.
The history of Nigeria.
Yeah, they have a long history with corruption, judicial interference.
It's been a problem for a while.
Yeah, it's systemic, like it's been brewing for decades.
So Wike's just a symptom.
He's a symptom, but it feels like he's making things worse.
Yeah, like he's pushing the boundaries.
Testing the limits.
Exactly.
So let's talk consequences.
Yeah, fair.
If judges are seen as being, in Wike's pocket,
Mm-hmm.
what happens to people's trust in the courts?
That's the core of it, right?
Yeah.
When people lose faith in the courts, they lose faith in the whole system.
Everything.
Like, why bother?
Exactly. It starts to feel like justice is only for the rich and powerful.
And that the system is rigged.
Yeah, and that's when things get really bad.
That's when society starts to break down.
People take the law into their own hands.
Yeah. Disputes are settled with force, with intimidation.
And the whole idea of a fair system, it crumbles.
It's a slippery slope, that's for sure.
And Professor Dinkalu, he connects all this to this bigger historical narrative.
Oh, how so?
He talks about this guy, Jerome Udoji,
Udoji, okay.
respected lawyer, served in Nigeria through like all these different eras.
Wow, so like colonial times.
Yeah, post-independence, even during military rule.
That's incredible.
It's a reminder that this fight for judicial independence, it's not new.
It's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, it's been a constant battle against all kinds of influence.
Colonial administrators, politicians, military leaders.
Everyone.
Wow.
Yeah, and what Odinkalu seems to be saying is that Wike, he's a setback.
Like a step backwards?
Yeah, back to a time when the judiciary was easily influenced. And he talks about how, there were always judges who resisted,
Good. Some who stood up for what's right.
even under pressure.
Brave judges.
But he's worried that this current generation, they might be more willing to bend.
That's a scary thought.
It is, and that leads to his big conclusion.
Which is?
Nigeria now has a minister, Wike, who's basically in charge of judicial subordination.
Again, that word, subordination.
I know it's heavy.
He's accusing Wike of systematically corrupting the judiciary and undermining its integrity.
It gets even more pointed.
What do you mean?
He suggests that the Chief Justice seems okay with the judiciary becoming fully Nyesomized.
Wow. Okay, he's not holding back.
No,
That's meant to shock people, right?
it's meant to be a wake-up call.
It paints a picture of a judiciary that's losing its independence, becoming a tool.
It's not just about individual cases anymore.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's about the whole culture of the judiciary.
Yeah, how it operates, the values.
And if that culture becomes one of accepting gifts and favors,
It's a recipe for disaster.
this is pretty heavy stuff, you know?
It is.
What can everyday Nigerians do about this?
Well, we can't all just start handing out SUVs to judges.
No, definitely not.
But we can speak out, raise awareness.
Make some noise.
Yeah, demand transparency, hold those in power accountable.
And support the organizations fighting for change.
Yes. There are groups working to promote judicial independence, fight corruption.
We have to use our voices, our actions.
We need a more just and equitable system.
It's not just about Nigeria either, right?
It's a global issue.
Yeah, erosion of democracy, it can happen anywhere.
And we all have to be vigilant.
Speak out against injustice.
Demand better from our leaders.
Odinkalu ends his article with a powerful image.
What is it?
He describes the judiciary as wicked, corrupted by Wike.
It's a wake-up call for sure.
It's like we can't be complacent.
No, we have to defend judicial independence, or the rule of law is at risk.
It makes you think how fragile justice really is.
So easily manipulated.
But it's also a call to action. We can't take it for granted.
No, we have to constantly fight for it.
Protect it, nurture it.
Exactly.
What's the key takeaway for our listener?
I think it's about thinking critically.
Okay.
Don't just accept things at face value, especially when it comes to power, to the justice system.
We have to question, scrutinize, demand evidence.
We can't just sit back and watch.
I have to be active participants in this fight for a just society.
And that starts with understanding the issues, like the ones we've been talking about.
Yeah, we focus a lot on Wike's actions, which are pretty out there.
Out there for sure.
But there are other ways that judicial independence can be chipped away at.
The less obvious way is right.
The subtle pressures, unspoken expectations, backroom deals.
Exactly, and that's what we'll look at next.
Yeah, the final part of our deep dive.
We'll explore those less obvious ways that justice can be compromised.
And we'll talk about how we can actually protect it.
Stay with us.
It's kind of scary to think about, you know? The biggest threats might be the ones we can't even see.
Yeah, like a slow poison. It just eats away at the system from the inside.
And we were saying, it's not always about those flashy gifts or the obvious corruption.
Right.
So what are some of those less obvious ways that judicial independence gets chipped away?
Okay, so think about this. Imagine you're a judge, and you know there's this powerful politician or a really wealthy business person, and they're always in your courtroom,
Okay.
even if there's no, like, direct deal, quid pro quo.
Yeah.
You still might feel this pressure, even subconsciously, to rule in their favor.
It's like you don't want to make an enemy,
Right.
especially a powerful one.
It's self-preservation.
Yeah.
And it might not even be a conscious choice,
It's just human nature.
Exactly. We want to avoid conflict, especially when your job, your career,
Your safety even.
is on the line.
It's like, it's not what, it's who you don't want to make mad.
That's a good way to put it.
And then there's the systemic stuff.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like what happens when the judiciary isn't funded well?
Oh, that's a big one.
It makes judges vulnerable
From
from other parts of the government.
That's right. They need resources.
If they're worried about budget cuts all the time,
Mm-hmm.
they might not make decisions that would upset the people who control the money.
It's like a quiet form of coercion.
And then there's how judges get appointed in the first place.
That's huge.
If it's not transparent, if it's all political,
It undermines the whole idea of an independent judiciary.
from the very beginning.
Exactly. Judges should be chosen on merit,
Qualification.
not favors or connections.
It's about making sure the best people are in those positions.
Right. And all of this, it can create this culture of self-censorship.
Oh, wow.
Judges might avoid taking on certain cases,
The tough ones.
the ones that could get them in trouble.
Even if they know it's the right thing to do.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
That justice could be silenced. Not by threats, but by fear.
It's a different kind of pressure.
So we need safeguards.
We need strong safeguards. Absolutely.
Like a transparent appointment process. Yeah. Proper funding for the courts. A culture of accountability.
In the legal profession.
So it's about building a system that supports judicial independence.
At every level.
From how judges are chosen,
To the resources they have.
to the environment they work in.
We need to make it harder for those subtle influences to take hold.
And what about us? What can we do?
We can't just sit back We have to stay informed.
Okay.
Understand how the system works.
Pay attention.
Pay attention to who gets appointed.
Support organizations that are pushing for reform.
Yeah, the ones advocating for change.
We can't be afraid to speak up.
We have to challenge injustice when we see it.
Hold our leaders accountable.
Demand transparency. Protecting judicial independence, it takes all of us.
You know, it's interesting how this all goes back to that very first case with Wike.
That local election. Back in '98.
Yeah, it's like a full circle moment.
It really is.
This small town dispute, it set a pattern in motion.
A pattern we're still seeing today.
It shows how important it is to pay attention, even to the small things.
Because they can reveal bigger problems.
It's a reminder that this fight for justice, it never really ends.
It's a constant struggle.
We always have to be vigilant.
Hold those in power accountable.
Well, I think we've learned a lot today.
Break gone deep.
From Wike's actions to a much bigger understanding of judicial independence.
How fragile it is, how easily it can be undermined.
But also the role we all play in protecting it.
It's on all of us.
So to our listeners, stay curious. Keep asking those tough questions.
And don't underestimate your voice.
Demand accountability. Protect the rule of law.
Until next time.